everybody, it's Jane. I hope you're doing great. I made quite a few fall cards this year and I wanted to show them to you using the Pretty Pink Posh fall release. I will have some details on all of the cards in this video. I used their 2 new stencils that they came out with. I also stamped something on every single envelope. I used Distress Oxide ink. This particular card uses Nouveau Glimmer Paste and Distress Oxide ink mixed together so I can get my own custom color. Pretty Pink Posh makes the best shaker dies. This particular one, I did not use it as a shaker, and I stitched around the edges with pearl cotton just to give it a little bit of a look, and there's a vellum behind that thank you right there, and again with a matching envelope. I really like doing the envelopes. And I also wanted to show you a horizontal card using the Pretty Pink Posh Grateful Shaker. So let's just get into it and let me show you what I did. Thanks for stopping by. So this particular card here, as you can see, has Nouveau Glimmer Paste. I use the color Moonstone. And I mixed together some Distress Oxide inks, starting with the Pretty Pink Posh Pumpkin Background Stencil. And then I also used the Autumn Leaves stencil to make a few other cards. So I started out with my Tim Holtz Splat Box and my Pixie Spray, and you need to shake your Pixie Spray really well before you use it. I did not know that, and I did not shake it the first time that I used it. I love the Pixie Spray because it sticks down all those little thin edges, so when I'm using paste or blending brushes, the material does not get underneath the stencil. I'm lining up my card. Now I will confess, I don't know if you see this, but the pumpkins are going sideways. I did not realize until I took pictures that there is an up and down to these pumpkins. There you go. This is a Nouveau Glimmer Paste. I put a little bit on my glass media mat. I used Distress Oxide Carved Pumpkin, and I just put a glump of that on my glass media mat. Use my offset spatula to plop it all in there, and in hindsight, I should have put the glimmer paste next to it, but I put it right in the middle of it, so I had to clean everything off. So do as I say, not as I do. I'm mixing all of that up together, and then I'm going to put a thin layer on the stencil. Now, I wasn't worried about running out. If I didn't have enough, I was just going to make a different color or a new color. I didn't really care if the colors all matched as long as they all blended. So as you can see, I'm scraping off a very thin layer, trying to move it around so I don't have to make any more. As the Maxwell Coffee says, it's good to the last drop. The thing about glimmer paste is you need to clean your materials as soon as you can. So I'm going to pull this off straight up so I don't mess it up. And then I'm going to go to the sink and I'm going to wash the stencil and the offset spatula, and then I will clean my glass media mat. I did have a little boo-boo there. And I'm going to set that aside to dry. I let mine dry overnight. You probably don't have to, maybe a couple of hours. I'm going to clean that up with my microfiber cloth. With the Autumn Leaves stencil, I thought this one was really pretty, and this does not have an up or down or right and left. I also put this in my splat box with my Pixie Spray. I do love the Pixie Spray because I don't have to worry about the edges lifting up. So I'm going to take that over to my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch cardstock. I'm going to lay it out and lay it down. I'm going to get some more Moonstone paste and Distress Oxide inks. I've got Fired Brick, Wild Honey, and Carved Pumpkin here. Again, I'm just going to smush some on my glass media mat. The glass media mat's great because it cleans up so easily, and I don't have to worry about staining my table. And then I'm going to mix some paste with the Moonstone. The beauty about doing this is that you don't have to buy a whole bunch of colors of Moonstone unless you want to. You can make your own. And I really love that. So I'm starting with the Wild Honey, and I'm just smushing a whole bunch on it. And then I'm going to move to the Fired Brick and lay some of it on. I'm just trying to get a little gradient of color here so it doesn't all look exactly the same. And then last but not least, I will do the carved pumpkin. And again, when you're all done, lift straight up so that you don't smush your Nouveau paste or whatever I'm trying to say. Mess it up. Get it, you know, smush it into the cracks. Lift it straight up and set it aside to dry. I don't know if you guys can see that. The glimmer in there is just really cool. So I took it off and cleaned it. Now I'm going to use my Taylor Expressions blender brushes. I love these because they're colors, but they're always on back order. So I have linked all of the products below, and in the links I will provide an alternative to you for these if you cannot wait for the Taylor Expression brushes. They are really, really cool. I waited about 3 months for those. So I have that same leaf stencil. I did not spray it again. It has enough sticky on the back of it from my previous project. And I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending here with the Distress Oxide ink. So I'm going to start with the Wild Honey and just give it a little blend there. I think I didn't have enough, so I put a little bit more on there. And because I have the different colors of the Tailored Expression brushes, I'm just switching from yellow, orange to a red brush, and then I don't have to wash my brush in between. I've sped this up because it's just basic ink blending. One thing I love about the Distress Oxide inks, if I could talk, is that they are so easy to blend. It doesn't take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and when you're blending over a stencil, nobody knows if it's right or wrong. And look how cool that came out. I'm in love. I just love the gradient look of those 3 colors on that leaf background. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the pumpkins and stick this one down, sped this up just a little bit for you as well, and just to show you how you can do it and how good it looks with the pumpkins as well. I'm really loving stencils and making my own backgrounds. I find it very fun. You can use a heavy hand or a light hand with these brushes. It just really depends on the color that you're trying to get. And I think that came out really good. I'm going to spray it with my sheer shimmer spritz in the sparkle. I was in the sparkle mood, I guess, and you can see the one on the left. I don't know if you can see, but I did spray some water on there to give it a little more splotchy look because the oxides do well. That is what the card looked with the leaves. See that texture there and that dimension and those colors? Here's a close-up of the one that I sprayed the water and the shimmer spritz sparkle on. And then the one on the left hand, I did not spray the water on. So we're going to turn these into cards. I took these cards and cut the backgrounds down using Simon Says Stamp Wonky rectangles. I also use the Simon Says Stamp Autumn Blessing stamp set. This is one of my favorite stamp sets. It's just love it. Typically I use my Misty, but sometimes I want to just keep experimenting with my blocks. I have 40-pound vellum here and a powder bag to keep the static electricity off of the vellum. I like to use Brutus Monroe embossing ink. It's one of my favorites. And I lay the stamp upside or right side up and I stamp on the stamp. And then I'm going to get my head in the way probably, and I'm going to stamp this down on the vellum. Give it a little CPR there to make sure it sticks. I'm going to use the Wow Copper Pearl embossing powder. This is new to me and I absolutely love it, so I can't wait to use more of it. It was a perfect choice for these fall cards. Now the thing about vellum is you need to get your heating tool good and hot, and your embossing powder should melt in minutes because you don't want the vellum to warp. And the Wagner tool is my favorite because it gets so hot. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to make a little banner on this card. I didn't want to hide my background. So I'm kind of eyeballing where I want. I'm going to fold it over, put some tape runner behind it. I'm going to use one of my favorite tape runners. I have quite a few favorites, but this is a really good one. I'm going to lay down one side. I'm going to line it up on my media mat to make sure that it's even. And then I'm going to line up the other side. I'm going to kind of hold it in place there. I'm sorry you can't see the bottom, but hold it in place and flap it around. And there you go. You've got yourself a very cool background on a card. I have cut some fun foam down a little bit smaller using the Lawn Fawn glue pen, which I have a lot of favorites, but this is, I think, my absolute favorite because it comes out in a really thin line and I have never had trouble with it clogging. I try to put the cap on right away, but even if I forget after a couple of seconds, it doesn't clog. You can dot your background, you can do a line. I wanted to show you that you can do either way. One of the reasons why I love liquid glue is that I have a little bit of wiggle room when I'm making my card. This is a Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock, which I love for card bases, and I creased it with my bone folder, and that is my absolute favorite bone folder. I felt that it needed a little bit of something, so I got my Nuvo drops out, and before you use your Nuvo drops, you need to give them a little burp to get the air out. And when you use Nuvo drops, you go down and then you lift your applicator up, off, straight up. And you can make big dots, little dots. It just really depends on what you want to do. One thing you have to do, and I know from personal experience, is you need to set them aside to dry because otherwise you're going to forget and then you're going to mess up your dots and then you'll be really, really sad. So I set mine far away so the cat can't walk at them, the dog can't lick them, and I can't bump them with my arm. So I'm using Autumn Red and I'm using English Mustard here. Those are the two that I ended up using for this particular card. And I just think those Nuvo drops just add such a difference in the way the card looks. There you go. Very, very fun. I really like that card. I hope you do too. All right, so let's get to the next card here. I want to try something a little bit different. So I'm going to cut my background on a diagonal and I'm going to pop this up on some fun foam and I'm going to stamp my sentiment down on the card just to give it a little dimension. I call that the valley and these are the mountains. So what I did was I cut my top piece off. I got the stamp I wanted, laid it on there as you can see to get a rough idea of how big of a space I need for that stamp to fit on there. I am then going to glue some fun foam to the back of these pieces that I cut out. I just kind of laid it on there as you can see here. Nothing fancy, no measurements. Give your scissors a little angle and off you go. Same thing on the other side. Sometimes I think we try to make card making a little more like rocket science rather than, oh, well, let me just cut these because no one's going to see it anyhow. So I glued those on there. Now I'm trying to lay out where I want it to be. I realized that I didn't cut my background down as small as I wanted it to be, so I needed to spread it out just a little bit more. You'll see here that the stamp does not fit, so I'm spreading out my triangles, and there's my pokey hair sticking out. Sometimes I wish I had a ponytail just to hide that pokey hair. Grabbing that with my block, gluing those two pieces down, keep them out of the way, and then I'm going to stamp that down with black ink. There we go. I'm getting it all lined up. Sometimes you need 5 hands. Using my embossing bag, my Brutus Monroe ink, and that same Wow Copper Pearl embossing powder. This one needed a couple of layers, a couple of shakes, on it. Make sure you get all the excess off and then hit it with your heat tool. I love watching embossing powder melt. I remember the first time I did it, I was like amazed that somebody actually invented that. I'm using those same 2 colors of Nuvo drops on that strip in the middle, and that is card number 2, all finished. So let's go to card number 3. We're going to make a shaker card right now, and I'm going to use that Pretty Pink Posh Grateful Shaker. I'm going to cut 4 of them. I'm going to have 3 of them under the acetate and 1 on top of the acetate. That way I have room for my sequins. I did cut it with the Simon Says stamp Wonky rectangle. You can't really see it on the newer one in the camera, but up close you can. It just gives you just enough detail that you don't have a cut raw edge. So I cut 4 of these out. I'm going to cut the word out of 3 of them. You can save them for later if you choose to. And I'm going to glue those 3 together. And that is going to be the part that holds all the shaker bits. And I'm just eyeballing it and cutting it. I try not to use a whole lot of glue when I'm doing these projects because I don't want it to seep out, especially when you're doing the acetate. You don't want the acetate to seep out, or the glue to seep out on the acetate, I mean. So I'm just stacking 3 together, and then I will show you what I do when I'm gluing on acetate. It's a trick that I saw somewhere, I can't remember where, and it works really, really, really well. Now I'm going to glue this pumpkin onto the background, and it needs lots of glue. Before that, I'm going to glue this to my acetate. So I'm just going to put a lot of dots of glue everywhere, and then I'm going to take my finger, you'll see, and I'm going to pat it on the glue because the glue has like a little mountaintop on it when you do a little dot like this. And when you squish it down on the acetate, it squishes out. That mountaintop squishes out. So I want to get rid of that mountaintop. So I will take my finger and I will blot it on all of that glue, those dots on the grateful. And then I will put it on my acetate, and I put a acrylic block on there and set it aside to make sure that it doesn't get bumped or anything like that. And as you can see, I'm a fan of 2 acrylic blocks for everything. Now this particular one needs a lot of glue in order for it to adhere to this pumpkin. And as you can see, those pumpkins are all facing to the left. I'm just laughing here because I didn't even know that it had a direction until I made pictures. I'm like, oh my gosh, all of these cards are sideways or upside down. But we won't tell anybody. It'll be our secret. My family probably won't even notice. Well, they probably will. So I'm just gluing that directly onto the card. And then I'm going to take a little smaller static bag and put it against that to keep the sequins from sticking to the glue. There might be a little bit of glue in there, and I don't want the sequins to stick to that. I'm going to take some scissors and cut the acetate around this pumpkin that has the grateful on it. That is going to be the top of our shaker card. And there's nothing fancy. I'm just cutting up as close to that edge as I possibly can. And as you can see, I'm totally off camera, which who knows. And that is all done and looks really, really good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take these little things, fallen leaves sequins, and I don't think you can get them anymore. You can try Googling it. I looked and I couldn't find them. But there's lots of sequins out there that are similar. And I'm going to put my little anti-static here. I think this is made by EK Success. And I like this because it has like a little point on it, so it gets right in there for the shaker cards. That's what I use it for. And I'm going to dump all of my sequins in there since I don't have very many left anyhow. And I'm going to just move them around and get them all nice and even. And then you need to make sure you have a really solid layer of glue. Otherwise, your sequins are going to come out of your shaker card. I'm taking the same cardstock and I'm cutting it in half, and I will have the cardstock link below. Cutting it in half. I am not. I'm folding it with my bone folder. And I put a 4 1/4 by 5 3/8 piece of white cardstock on top of the orange. And then this shaker is 4 by 5 1/4. I felt that the yellow needed a little bit of a border around it before it go right to the orange cardstock. And that is my grateful shaker. Now I cut this background with a paper tray ink. It's called a stitch background die. And I'm going to do some basic stitching here. I have some DMC pearl cotton, and I'm just going to go in one hole and down one hole and up one hole and down one hole and up one hole until you get to the other side. Nothing fancy about this stitching. Anybody could do this stitching. It's called a running stitch. My 5-year-old, well, maybe my 8-year-old could probably do stitching like this. So if you've never done any stitching, I highly recommend you give something as easy as this a try. It's really fun, and it just gives you just a little bit of texture to your card, and people go, oh my gosh, she sewed it. So when you get to the other side, you just cut it off and you put another piece of tape on there and you have stitched yourself a card. How fun is that? Oh my gosh. Now, when I am looking for colors of paper, I have this ring. I used a label, and I go through my stash to see what matches, and then I go to my stash and find it, rather than looking through all my papers. I have cut 3 of these pumpkins, and as you can see, I cut the words out of all 3 because I decided I did not want to make a shaker card. And I'm just gluing all 3 together. I will let you know right up front that I had video issues. And as you can see, the pumpkins are all going to the right. Oh, I turned it right side up. And I did not video the whole portion of this. I am going to grab my Simon Says stamp, and it should also be in CZ Designs stamp set. And all the thanks, and I'm going to use this for this particular card, grabbing my 40-pound vellum with my powder bag, with my embossing ink. Brutus Monroe, stamp is facing up. I like to take the ink to the stamp, and I will stamp that with some CPR pressure. And I'm going to use that same Wow Copper Pearl embossing powder that I used earlier. And I'll make sure my heat gun is good and hot, and I will take it to the cardstock. This particular set has matching dies. I use these offset pliers, I guess they're called, to cut them off. I will link to those below. And I am going to cut this die out, and I'm going to take some 1/4-inch score tape, and I'm going to score that to the middle of that pumpkin, and that is the part that did not appear. I put some foam here in between the two, and the thank you will be in the middle of the pumpkin. There will be a picture at the end of what I did. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to my video. Who knows what happens to videos? Anyway, here is a final look of all 4 cards. You can see that thank you in the upper left-hand corner with the stitching. You can see the horizontal grateful card on the upper right, the vellum banner on the lower right, and the, I call it Mountain and Valley card on the bottom left. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoy these cards and you're encouraged to maybe try making a few of your own. Have a great one.